Let us continue. The third one, regulation on house redemption. It is indicated in chapter 25, verses 29 to 34. Let's read. Anyone who sells a house in a walled city retains the right of redemption a full year after sale. During that time, the seller may redeem it. If it is not redeemed before a full year has passed, the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to the buyer and the buyer's descendants. It is not to be returned in the Jubilee. But houses in villages without walls around them are to be considered as belonging to the open country. They can be redeemed, and they are to be returned in the Jubilee. The Levites always have the right to redeem their houses in the Levitical towns, which they possess. So the property of the Levite is redeemable. That is, a household in any town they hold, and is it to be returned in the Jubilee, because the houses in the towns of Levites are their property among the Israelites. But the pasture land belonging to their towns must not be sold. It is their permanent possession. Yes, this is about regulation on house redemption. Uh, there are two ways in redeeming a house. The first case is the house in the walled city, means a house in the castle. The other case is a house in the open country, in the villages. First one, a house in the castle or house in the walled city. In this case, the house can be redeemed within a year, but after 1 year, you cannot buy it back. You cannot redeem it. Why? Why is it so? Because it probably that the walled city, the house in the walled city doesn't have any land. That's why usually, the Jubilee is applied to the house with pasture land. That's why. How about there's another case. A city, a house of Levite in the walled city. This is different. So just now we saw that a house in the walled city can be redeemed only within a year. But if the house belongs to Levite, even though the house is in the walled city, anytime the house can be redeemed. Because you need to think about this. When Israel was distributed land, the Levite was not given the land. Only 48 castles, cities, and some pasture lands. So that's why, to protect the right of Levite, actually, the house in the walled city, anytime it can be redeemable. Third case, how about a house outside a walled city, which means in the village? In this case, a house can be redeemed anytime. Now, number 4, regulation on regulation on interest. Chapter 25, verses 35 to 38. To 38. Let's read. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and are unable to support themselves among you, help them as you do a foreigner and stranger, so they can continue to live among you. Do not take interest or any profit from them, but fear your God, so that they may continue to live among you. You must not lend them money at interest or sell them food at a profit. I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. Amen. Usually when a man becomes poor, then he sell his land, and then since he doesn't have any land anymore, so he become tenant farmer. He become peasantry. So he works under someone who has a lot of land. This way, actually, they can survive. But even though they work as a tenant farmer, so when harvest is not enough, then they need to lend food again. They need to borrow. They need to borrow food again or money. Then tenant farmer peasantry become poorer and poorer. Then he need to borrow money or grain again. Then finally he becomes slave of rich farmer. When that's why God forbid the people who lend their money or grain, they shouldn't take any interest, because when they take a lot of high interest, the poor farmer cannot pay it back. Then they become poorer and poorer. They must do this. So that's why they cannot, the rich farmer cannot take high interest, because they are brothers together. They are equal before God. They made a covenant with God on Mount Sinai as brothers. So when they made a covenant with God, God appeared to them in thick cloud, and Israel was really, really afraid of God, and they were fearful. That's why if the Israel fear of God, then they cannot take high interest, and they cannot become rich through taking high interest. So if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 23, okay, let's go. Deuteronomy 23, verses 19 to 20. Deuteronomy 23, 19 to 20. It talks about not taking interest when you lend food or money. 19 to 20 of chapter 23. Do not charge your fellow Israelite interest, whether on money or food or anything else that may earn interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but not a fellow Israelite, so that the Lord your God may bless you in everything you put your hand to in the land you are entering to possess. Right? And chapter 24, verses 10, 24, verses 10 to 13. Chapter 24, 10 to 13. When you make a loan of any kind to your neighbor, do not go into their house to get what is offered to you as a pledge. Stay outside and let the neighbor to whom you are making the loan bring the pledge out to you. If the neighbor is poor, do not go to sleep with their pledge in your possession. Return their cloak by sunset so that your neighbor may sleep in it. Then they will thank you, and it will be regarded as a righteous act in the sight of the Lord your God. That's right. God commanded Israel to even respect your brother who wants want to borrow money or food from you. Even when you lend food or money, and if you take clothes, then you have to return it by night, because the cloak is the all possession of the poor farmer. Then the cloak is used as a blanket, covers, so it is necessary item. That is why, when you lend money to the poor people, poor farmer, you do not charge interest. Then God will acknowledge you as righteous, right? Then God will regard, right, you as righteous. So by not taking interest, you can keep a poor Israelite to become slave. This way, the society of Israel can be righteous. Then righteous society can be realized in Israel. Okay, number 5. Now, in Jubilee, there are regulation on redeeming slaves. It is indicated in chapter 25, verses 39 to 55. Quite long verses. So there are 2 cases on in regulation on redeeming slaves. First one, an Israelite brother went bankrupt and sold himself to a Israel family. And second one is a poor Israelite brother sold himself to Gentile or stranger. First one, First case, becoming a slave to an Israelite family. Verses 39 to 46. Verses 39 to 46. Let's go. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, do not make them work as slaves. They are to be treated as hired workers or temporary residents among you. They are to work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then they and their children are to be released, and they will go back to their own clans and to the property of their ancestors, because the Israelites are many servants whom I brought out of Egypt. They must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear your God. Your male and female slaves are to become from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you, and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make themselves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. Right? If one farmer doesn't have enough crops, enough harvest, it means he will go bankrupt, and then he will sell all of his land and then become peasantry, become tenant farmer. And even working as a tenant farmer, still, if